talk about storyboarding and making these movies. And I just had this vision of what it was like in your house. What was it like growing up in your home? Do you think from your kid's perspective, from your perspective also as dad, that what role did dreams play? And was there a time when dreams weren't really a thing and then then they were? And how did that look in your house?
That's a great question. Absolutely. We talk about this quite a bit, right? Because one of the things is I think it's so important to dream, but also one of the things that can happen, especially within families, is I think kids can start to assume that their parents' dreams, especially if they talk about them, that they should be theirs, or they start to feel pressure that their dreams should be the same and all of that. And so one of the things we've always really tried to do is to be able to say, okay, these are our dreams. And you see, literally our boys were 6 and 7 when this thing happened. Well, 5 and 6 initially, and then 6 and 7 as it really started to kind of take off. So it's always been a part of our lives, but at the same time, they had to dream for themselves. And so, I mentioned early on that, we did this short film with them as Lego agents. And that was a direct, kind of ripple effect of these conversations. Cause we were talking about that, that was about the time that my speaking career really started to take off and all of that. And the boys were curious about it. But I just kind of sat them down at one point and said, hey guys, this is Dad's dream, but it doesn't have to be your dream at all. Let's talk about the things that you like to do. And what I realized early on was when I asked a 6 and 7-year-old, especially what their dreams were, they looked at me like, I have no idea. Like that's a heavy word. That's a big word. And I now doing big dream gatherings all over the place, we see some young kids come, and I love that. And some kids really can get a hold of that word and be okay with it. But a lot of kids, that's too big a word. And so, and that's what the case was for our boys. Like, they were like, I don't know that we know what our dreams are. So I said, what do you like? What do you like to do? What are you curious about? And, at that time they were really into Legos and really into, the Lego movies that were starting to pop up on YouTube and things like that. And they were like, well, we like watching these. And it was like, okay, well, that's great. I said, what if we make one? And they were like, can we do that? Can we do that? And I'm like, I don't know, but I think we can. And I said, let's just kind of think through, what do you think it would take? And so they were like, well, we need a story. And I was like, okay, let's think through that. And instead of writing out a script, I kind of thought, okay, at this point they're 7 and 8 basically. And I was like, we can draw pictures. Let's just draw pictures of what that might look like. And we kind of drove around. I'm in Des Moines, and we drove around a little bit downtown Des Moines, and kind of like, we could use that bridge. That'd be kind of fun. How could we use that bridge? And then our younger son, Alex, was like, I want to use my scooter, like, okay, there's no rules, so why not? And so we wound up coming up with this story that didn't necessarily, like, it won no Oscars that year, I can tell you. But it was absolutely amazing. And I shot it on a little flip camera. I mean, now we do videography. I have a team, that goes with me for events a lot of the time. And we do a lot of this, but had no idea what we were doing. But we just did it together, and it was really a fun thing. And it really just came from that, not so much the question of what's your dream, but what are you curious about? What do you want to try?
So I'm wondering, when you are doing these big gatherings and 300 people show up, and then people from 6 different states, at what age do kids really start participating in that? And, do you try to get a 5-year-old involved? Do you try to define what a dream is? And when do they really start to take hold of that? What did that look like?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I would say that our up until Bend, Oregon, our record holder was a 9-year-old. And at one big dream gathering, he posted 32 dreams. And I loved his story because he actually came, his little redhead named Ian, and he came to a big dream gathering, and he had a tough home life. I only know this because he was in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program, and he came with his big because his parents were not in the picture very much. And so, I was telling some of the stories, and I saw him in the crowd. So I told, a couple of the extra stories of younger kids going after dreams. And he just started writing dreams down. And I had said to the crowd, like, listen, our record holders, 28 dreams at one big dream gathering, which is still a lot of dreams in a, hour and a half, 2-hour period. Right. And this kid just went to town, which he had little red hair. So I was like, boom, I could see his head go. And he just started writing like crazy. And he comes up later on with this pile of dream sheets, and it had a Post-it note on the top, which I loved. And it had like 32 hash marks on it. And I start going through the dream sheets. Like, I want to go to Disney. Like, awesome. You know, I want to be a cop. Awesome. I want to learn how to cook. Awesome. My favorite one is I want to be a dad someday. Just like at 9 years old, you know, this kid had it figured out. And then I go back to the Post-it note. I was like, dude, there are 32 hash marks on this thing. Do you mean you've written down 32 dreams? I'm like, that's incredible. He's like, yeah. And I said, I told you the record was 28. Why not just go for 29? And he kind of looks at me. He's like, anybody can do 29, which is awesome. Now, here's the thing is like you and I help people get clear on dreams. We work with entrepreneurs, all of those things, right? We know that oftentimes if you're really going to go after a dream, it really helps to get clear on the why. It helps to get clear on some of the logistics. It helps to get clear on those kinds of things. But especially at a younger age, we can learn from them because his weren't SMART goals. They weren't specific and measurable, attainable, realistic, all that kind of stuff. And that's totally okay, right? He started out with some big, broad dreams, and some of which he maybe could take action on immediately. A lot of them were probably going to be dreams for the future, a different season in his life, and that's totally okay. But I think kids could really start early as long as we don't let practicality jump in too soon.
How do you define a dream?
How do I define a dream? It's a great question. So I say it's an aspiration that inspires you to move forward.
Cool.
So it is different than a goal, but that's like my podcast is Dream, Think, Do. And I really do believe that hopefully it's catchy. And you've been on there before, so you know, but Dream, Think, Do is also a 3-step process. So I really do believe that we need to give ourselves that permission to dream separately from the permission to think and plan. Right. And I think sometimes the killer, especially I know for parents, because part of our deal, right, we want our kid to grow and thrive, but we also want them to survive, right? We want to keep them safe. And so I know for me, sometimes when my kids would start to talk about certain dreams, you know, the protector inside me would want to start to move into practicality. Like, whoa, wait a second. Can you really afford that? Wait, can you really live a life like that? Wait, that could be dangerous, you know, all that stuff. But to be able to go, wait, let's let them dream. And then we can start to walk through, think through, talk through some of those scenarios. But at the same time, like, don't think too soon, especially when you're talking with your kids.
Yeah, that's a really good point. How to give space to dream and then get practical. It's like
Right.
we practice that in our business with the team when we're doing these kickoff calls in the morning. That will define like this is brainstorming time. Let's not get into what we actually call blueberries. We've coded this word blueberries as like we're getting into too small details.
Yeah.
So somebody will go, all right, this is a little blueberries, but
I love it. It's kind of your safety word.
That's right. That's it. Yeah. So, or somebody will yell like, hey, that's a little too blueberries for this conversation. But I love the giving the space to dream and then getting practical.
Yeah.
Let's back up even further from your kids to your childhood.
Yeah.
And tell us about what you remember about dreaming as a kid. Where was it nurtured and where might it have been shut down?
Absolutely. So it's funny in that my parents were amazing. Like if I ever complain about my childhood, I give everybody permission to punch me in the face, hardcore, like right smack in the face. My parents are amazing. What's interesting is that I would say if there was a dream killer, it was me. I actually grew up a nervous kid. Like I have a black belt level ability to worry. And that started early on. So I actually had some health stuff when I was growing up too, where worry and stress then made that worse. So I would miss a week or two of school at a time.
I'm with you on that, by the way. That was really? That was my experience in high school.
Interesting. Yeah.
And junior high, high school. So I would say 7th to about 11th, 7th to 10th grade was the worst.
Interesting. Yeah. For me, it's interesting. It actually charts back to a dairy intolerance or a milk intolerance.
That's me.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, and totally wildly misunderstood. How do we not know this about each other? That's crazy.
Right.
So yeah,
retitling the show. How to deal with your own
front
dairy
row
intolerance.
dairy-free dads.
All right.
So
Keep
yeah,
going.
no,
Back
but
to the
absolutely.
dreams.
So that, all that being said, though,
Yeah.
I grew up a pretty scared kid, and then I would go and have these experiences. Hopefully you never had this experience, but I know, like, my first, my parents said, hey, you should go for summer camp. My brother loved summer camp, and I went to summer camp, and my mom, being the amazing mom that she was, she had actually by that time figured out that I was allergic to milk. Doctors didn't understand that stuff at the time. And so she'd made all these special meals. She found out what the menu was, and she actually made all these special meals. So I had the same food as everybody else. They just had to get it out and put it on a tray and all these kinds of things. But like, the camp didn't quite know how to handle that at the time, because, those kinds of things were so rare that they actually sat me at my own table and wouldn't let other kids sit with me. I know, brutal, right? It's one of those, it's like, someday I told our boys, someday when you write a script, put that in there, but people won't believe it. But what's interesting is that then, at some point, I just decided that and my parents were very encouraging, but at some point I basically just had to decide, I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And I would take these small steps towards dreams. And I was always kind of an extreme kid. So one of the things was, at about 11 and 12, I figured out that I loved bikes. I loved riding bikes. We had a bike ride across the state of Iowa called Ragbri, and I was just fascinated by it. So, and my parents helped me figure out a way to go on that, and they went with me, all those kinds of things. But I then fell in love with the bike shop. I grew up in this little town of Newton, Iowa. It's like straight out of one of those Hallmark Christmas movies, with the courthouse and the shops on the square. And the bike shop was 2 blocks off the square. It was next to the Goodwill and around the corner from the strip club, which was a totally cool place to hang out at 12. Right. And I just basically, I kind of at that point said, I love this. I kind of thought that was my dream job. And so every day of the summer of my 12th year on the planet, I basically figured out a way to loiter in the bike shop. So I, dusted bikes. I swept out the alley behind. I mowed the lawn of the owner, sometimes to his surprise, that kind of stuff, whatever it took to not get arrested for loitering. And at the end of that summer, they actually gave me my first dream job, and they invited me to come and work for them, kind of initially illegally, but at 13, I had my first dream job, which was amazing. And that's, I think, where I got my first taste of entrepreneurism, all of those things. But I just kind of learned from that, I was scared, but at the same time, if I stay with something, there's a payoff to it. Yeah. And so I just kind of applied that to the rest of my life. And I always had kind of weird aspirations anyway, and just realized that a lot of times a little bit of weirdness and a whole lot of tenacity would generally pay off.